Hi, everyone. I'm Yatin Chu. I'm co-vice president of Place NYC. In the room with me is Jean Han, who's also co-VP of Place. And doing the presenting tonight will be our secretary, Deborah Alexander. We've done these type of events before. We're parents that keep on top of a lot of things that our public schools are doing. And we thought, we started this last year and we thought, you know what, we should do this to help other parents. So this is what this event is all about. We prepared a slide presentation that Deborah is going to take us through, and we'll leave room for Q&A afterwards for those of you who have questions for us. So that lays out the evening's program. I'm going to now turn it over to Deborah Alexander.
Hi, everybody. I am so happy to see so many parents here. I'm super curious to know how many are seventh grade parents and eighth grade parents. Maybe we can do a little poll later and see, or earlier, because I think this presentation and the understanding of the high school process is really important but before even seventh grade. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started, even though we've got a whole bunch of people coming in. So yes, this presentation was geared initially towards eighth grade parents who had just been through the process and seventh grade parents who are about to go through the process. I will share that I just went through the process with my second child this year. So it's fresh in my memory. I went through the first process, high school application process, during COVID. So as bad as the process may seem, trust me, it was worse when that was happening. So you are a little bit lucky in that respect. So we're just going to go ahead. Okay. So we're going to talk about, this is basically the rundown of the program. We're going to talk about eighth grade high school offers that have already been out and perhaps what options eighth grade parents have at this point. And then we're going to talk about seventh grade families who are interested in already starting to plan for next year's process. We will talk about the types of schools there are, what you have to do to submit, important deadlines and timelines, and what you can do now, because there's a bunch you can do now. So starting with current eighth grade parents, I hope we have some here. If you are either super duper happy with your offer and you're already getting the merch and starting to plan for next year, or perhaps you are not that happy, or you're somewhere in between where maybe you got something on your list, but not your top choices, and you're considering your options. That limbo place can be really tricky, even deciding between two offers. So particularly for eighth grade parents who are not at all happy or didn't receive any of their choices, you're going to want to look at either private or parochial schools, even if you have not looked at them before, even if you have not taken the tests that they require, the TAKS or the IC, call them if you're interested, because as I was saying to somebody, if they have space, they would love to take your money and love to have your child. They may not have space. Very popular programs in schools are all full at this point, but there are some that are not. I know for a fact, I live in Queens, and the parochial school near me said, absolutely, you didn't take the test, no problem, send me the transcript. And they were happy to look at somebody at this point, even though they're processes are closed. So just contact them individually. And then, as I'm sure you all know, the wait lists are active. You are automatically added to the wait lists, any wait list above the offer that you were given. You can also add yourself to your child to any wait list, but be mindful that anyone with a priority above yours, so that includes tier, that includes geographic priority, that includes if you have done an assessment or not, those people will have priority over you because you're going to be at the back of the waitlist list. But a lot of wait lists do move. My daughter just came home and told me my friends are getting offers from the wait list. So it's happening. It will continue to happen through, I believe, early September. And there are no wait lists for the specialized high schools. They do not backfill, they do not add. In fact, they tend to over offer, and knowing that some seats will not, some families will not take those seats, but that ship has sailed for the year. So if you're new to the process, I'm going to start by just giving you some key dates, because you're going to want to know when. The first thing that's going to happen is, and I wish we've been asking the DOE to move this sooner, but as it stands, they will open the application process tending to be in September. So they're going to give you the timeline for the application process at the same time that they open your My Schools account to be able to start marking down schools. My Schools, however, you've probably used for middle school already. You can still look at the school directory and you can still get an idea of all the schools. You just can't start selecting them or favoriting them. You can still search with all their filters now. So there's a lot you can do, but the actual application won't open until likely sometime in the fall, usually in September. The SHSAT, which is the Specialized High School Admissions Test, tends to be at the end of October, early November. That's what it was before COVID. It was a disaster, and now it seems to be back on that timeline. They will tell you the exact date for that, again, when the timeline opens in September, likely. SHSATs are given at your child's eighth grade school, eighth grade class. If you sign up, you don't have to sign up. It is also given if you're in a private school currently or not in the system, it will be given on a weekend. If you are sick and you have a doctor's note, you can then take it later. That happens as well. Then you have basically from September when it opens through tends to be the beginning of December, December 1st, December 3rd, around there, that the application closes. And while the DOE tends to move a lot of deadlines, they're usually pretty steadfast on their application deadline. One tip or trick that I will impart is that should you need to make a change to your list after that deadline, you can generally contact your guidance counselor, and they have a little extra buffer of time where they can go in and change it. But you will not be able to go into My Schools and change it after that deadline. The timeline for parochial and private schools, parochial are religious schools, and private are also called independent schools. Their applications open usually in the fall, sometimes a little earlier, sometimes in August. You can register for the tax exam, but their decisions come a lot earlier. So their decisions are usually in January and February. And the big thing to know about the dueling timelines is that when you get an offer to a private or a parochial school, they generally ask for a deposit, and the deposit deadline is usually before the release of the public school offers. So it puts parents in a really big bind. We've also asked the DOE to move up the timeline, but it's complicated. So you may, if you're interested in having that insurance, have to put down a deposit, which can range from the hundreds to the thousands, and while you're waiting for your public school offer. So what are we looking at? In the suburbs where I grew up, I had a high school to go to. There was no choice. We have 400 high schools in New York City, 400 just buildings, high school facilities. And within those 400 high schools, there are 700 programs. What do I mean by programs? So for example, at Forest Hills High School, that is a huge high school, but they have a program called the Carl Sagan Science Program. That is a completely separate track that goes through that school, and you apply for it separately. So you can apply both to Forest Hills High School and to the Carl Sagan Science Program, and those are two choices you have. So there are lots of programs even within the schools. Private and parochial schools, there are a lot. I will be upfront about you. It is not my area of expertise, private and parochial. Maybe there are some other folks who know a little more. We're going to try and give you as much knowledge as we have, but their processes are very unique to each individual school. So there's not really one general talk you can give just about them as a category. And then you might be wondering about charter schools. So there are 78 charter high schools. Some of them are attached to K to 12 or 6 to 12. Some of them are standalone high schools, but there are 78 of them. So for private schools, they generally require, and this is non-parochial, they generally require a standardized exam, the ISEE or the SSAT. Some schools will accept either. Some schools prefer one or the other. I'm told it's some of the all girl schools or all boys schools prefer one or the other. Yes, it's individual by school. There's a lot to do for each one. There's interviews, there's site visits, there's the application, letters of recommendation, short essays. They might want to meet the parents, and an application fee that goes along with private school applications. Then we have parochial, or again, religious schools. And what you're looking at on the screen is an example. We have a parent who has a student at Xaverian in Brooklyn. And so he was kind enough to give us sort of the rundown for that school. I want to stress that parochial schools in general do not care what religion you are or you practice. And very many of them are don't have a heavy religious bent. Some do, if that's something you're interested in, some don't. So it's definitely interesting to check out. I thought that the education that I looked at when I looked at parochial schools was very, very high quality, and an excellent option and alternative to public school. Parochial schools tend to also be lower in tuition than independent or private schools. So if you look at what's on the screen, you can see they require the tax exam. Then they have a separate scholarship exam for merit-based aid. Some schools have merit-based aid, some have need-based aid only. You can see the application timelines, but again, that's going to apply to this school. Every school will have their own timeline. And you can see the admissions letters were sent in January. So if you were looking between this school and a public school, you would have to sort of wait and perhaps give a deposit. Charter schools are solely based on lottery. So if you apply, we're going to put the link to where to apply and to a list of all of the 78 charter schools in the chat for you. It's purely lottery. It's a centralized application for most of them. There are a few that do their own, but in general, you can go just put your name in and they will call your lottery number, perhaps. You submit by April 1st. So you might find out about a charter school after you found out. In fact, you will find out about a charter school after you found out about your other options. So you can see the results are late April and early May for those. So this is a look at the New York City high school application sort of writ large. You have essentially 3 different potential applications to make. You'll see there's the general high school application on the left, and that's required by every family has to put something down. If not, the DOE will assign your child somewhere. Then the second column are specialized high schools, which you do not have to apply to. Totally optional. And then LaGuardia, while LaGuardia is considered a specialized high school under the law, it's got its own process because it's an arts-based specialized high school, and you do not take the specialized high school admission test, the Shazat, to gain entrance to LaGuardia. Just to finish sort of on LaGuardia, there tends to be an academic requirement. At this year, it was a 65 average. That you had to make, as well as your audition or portfolio score. In the past, that number has been higher, and in the future, that number could be higher. But that's the only academic requirement for LaGuardia. Specialized high schools, the only thing they are looking at, that is it, is the specialized high school admission test score, the Shazat score. That's you either make the cutoff for a school or you do not. And it's very, very straightforward. The big thinking you have to do is ranking your schools. One tip and trick, and could be fairly obvious, is if you are ranking your specialized schools and you put Stuyvesant High School tends to have the highest cutoff score. If you put Stuyvesant Fourth, you are not going to get Stuyvesant because if you make it into Stuyvesant based on your cutoff, you will sooner get into a school that's higher on your list. So, but we can talk about that in questions and answers about ranking. Then over here,
Deb,
yes,
Deb, I'm sorry. I just wanted to interject with this.
Yes.
If you are from a school where you're eligible for Discovery, then we strongly suggest you put the school that you really want to go to as your top school. Because if you put a different school thinking the cutoff is lower, then you will not be able to, most likely you will get Discovery offered to that school and not the school that you really want to go to.
So to explain a little further, the Discovery program allows for kids who attend a Title I middle school. If your school is eligible for Title I, meaning 60% or more of the students are eligible for free and reduced price lunch, you score very near the cutoff for the lowest cutoff for specialized high schools. You might be eligible, or you are eligible, and you might get a seat in the Discovery program, which means that you go through, I believe, a 2-week program over the summer, and then you get a seat at a specialized high school. Then on the left, we're looking at the general high school application. And that is required. Again, you can rank up to 12 schools, and your guidance counselor will tell you, just like we did in college, you want a balanced application. You can put some reaches, some matches, and some safeties. You generally want to have something on your list that you can live with, and then you figure out the ranking based on what you and your child would like. Within those schools, we have screened schools, academically screened schools. There are also schools screened by language for dual language. There are audition and art schools. Those you have to audition or submit an arts portfolio. You'll hear another category called Ed Opt, or educational option. Those schools basically strive to have an equal number of kids who are they'd say like 4s and then 3s and then 2s academically. So they have a certain number of high achieving, a certain number of middle, and a certain number of struggling students to balance out the school. So it is heterogeneous when it comes to academic ability. Then you have schools that are completely open to anyone. You have zone schools. Not every borough or district has a zoned high school. We are looking into asking the DOE. A lot of parents have been asking the DOE to equalize that and have zone schools for everyone, but that will probably not be the case by September when you guys are applying. And so the zone schools work similarly to the way they did in kindergarten and in middle school, where if you are in the zone, you have priority to go to that school. If you are in a crowded zone, it's not a guarantee that you can go there. It is, you just have priority to go there. If they are full, they will then look to your lottery number, which we'll get into, to break those ties and see who makes it in. That's particularly important out in Queens and Staten Island and some Brooklyn areas. Then you have the early college program. You may have heard of Bard Early College. There are actually 13 early college programs which involve earning college credits. You can get as much as 2 years of college credit and an associate's degree at Bard Early College. Hunter Math and Science, I believe you get 1 year of credit at Hunter. Those are options also. Those tend to be screened schools as well. And then there are CTE schools. So CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. If you are older, you might remember that we used to call them vocational schools. They've changed a lot. CTE schools are an incredible option that I hadn't realized is very different than vocational schools. They are focused on an area, so they could be on engineering, they could be in the arts, where they are less classically trained, you could say. They're more geared toward giving you a marketable skill at the end of your 4 years. In fact, many of them offer certificates at the end, so you could go into the workforce if college was not in your future. But many, many kids who go to CTE schools go on to college and continue on the path that they started at the CTE school. So those are most of the, we also have, there are D75 schools, there are ASD Nest high schools, there are language schools, for newcomers. There's a lot of other types of high schools, but these tend to be the most frequently applied to. So what do you have to think about when you think about your child, and your child's application? There are things that are constant and things that are variable. Admissions priorities can vary. So where you live, if you have zoned priority, if you don't have zoned priority, if you qualify for diversity in admissions, we have a list coming up a little later in the presentation about the schools that participate in DIA, or diversity in admissions. That means they are holding aside a certain percentage of their seats for families who qualify for a free reduced price lunch. In addition, many schools hold aside seats for students with disabilities, or SWD. So it's something to start to get to know your student's profile, your family's profile. Is the school a continuing school? So it's 6 to 12. And that means that the 8th graders at that school are going to have priority over someone who's not at that school. There is no sibling priority for high school. Then you're looking at another set of variables. Where on the academic spectrum is your child? Where on the artistic spectrum is your child? The way that they are going to look at screen schools right now, and I believe in the future, they do not look at state test scores. That's a holdover from COVID. So the only academic information they're going to get for your child are the 7th grade final grades from your school. And if your school's not on a 1 through 4, or if they're on a 1 through 100 scale or an ABC scale, the DOE will convert it. And they will come up with the top 10%, my goodness, 15%, top 15% of a school, and then a top 15% number in the city. And either one will qualify you for tier 1. And whatever that cutoff may change, it was 93 and change 2 years ago, it was 94 this year, or yeah. And then the tiers will go beyond that. So tier 2 would be 89 to 94 average, and it goes successively down. That's for screened programs only. So yes, so then you have the different tiers. And again, I'm rambling, and I will clarify anything, and we will all clarify in question and answers. I mentioned the EdOpt, so that's how the tier is also used to figure out who is in the 3 different groups to make those EdOpt programs. Then you're going to look at your child's artistic abilities, and are they interested in a dance program? Are they interested in a fine arts program, a music program? And you have to create a portfolio or perform an audition. The auditions have been, since COVID, they have been recorded and on video, although they did have this year, and maybe last year, they had callbacks in person, which was nice. Then the other type of screening involves essays and potentially videos. A couple of schools started out with a video that they will give you a prompt, the child a prompt, the student will record a video, and then perhaps they will invite them back to write an essay. Some schools just give an essay and you submit the essay. So you're going to look at all of these things when you are considering what types of programs you want to look at. One nice thing about the My Schools app and website is that you can filter schools by these categories. You can look at screen schools, or you look at art schools, or look at both, CTE schools. And then there's the dreaded lottery or random number. The DOE calls it a random number, but we colloquially refer to it as a lottery number. And essentially, lottery numbers have always been used. They've been used in kindergarten. They've been used in high school. They've always been used, not to the extent that they're used now. They play a larger part in the application process than they used to. But if you have two students with a similar profile, similar priorities, admissions priorities, similar grades, you're going to have to find a way. How do you figure out which student gets the seat? And there are more applicants than there are seats. You have to pick one of the students, and that's where the random number comes in. Whoever has the higher lottery number is going to get the seat if all the other things are equal than the other person. So yes, I started without realizing. So yes, every student is assigned a random number. It's a hexadecimal number. It's this crazy number. You're really only going to need to look at the first two digits of that number. It's going to be in your My Schools account once it opens. You don't get to see it until, like I said, that application process will open in September. That's when you'll see the lottery number. And they are used within the screened groups, but even within popular zoned programs, that's how they figure out who gets a zoned seat. So I hate to call them bad lottery numbers, but that's, there are lottery numbers that are higher, and that's not good. And obviously the lower the number, the closer you are in line to get what you want. Essentially what they do is they call up person one who has, you get a little ticket and you're number one, they call you up first and they say, okay, what schools would you like? And you tell them. And since no seats have been assigned, you get pick of the litter. And then they start going to all. And if you have number 100, there are going to be fewer seats left, if any, at number 100. So we have crowdsourced over the years to see what lottery numbers tend to get admitted. The DOE has not revealed this information. We're trying to get them to, but they cite privacy concerns. But we're working on it to release, similarly to the Shazat scores where they give the cutoff scores. They could give cutoff scores for all of the screen schools, but right now we're sort of crowdsourcing that information, and roughly we've been able to suss out what lottery numbers have the likeliest chance to get in, or the highest lottery number, the lowest lottery number. Lottery numbers are not involved in specialized high school admissions. Something to note is that if the cutoff score for HSMSE was 520, every student who got a 520 would get into that school. And that is how it happens. There's no tie, like all of the ties, they all go in. If you have a 519, you don't go. And if you have a 520, you get a seat. And that's it. It's very straightforward. So I said earlier, there's so much you can do now. So now is when I would suggest, and I think people have varying opinions about when to start studying for the Shazat if you are interested in taking it. It is not too late. I know folks who have started studying in the spring, or so in the summer, and some who even studied in the fall. There's math on there that has not yet been covered, that you will start to cover in 8th grade, and some math that schools don't cover, and you really need to get a practice book or a tutor or a group and learn that math. But now it would not be an inappropriate time to start studying for the Shazat. You can research schools. Like I said, My Schools has the functionality to sort and search and filter, and you can look at all kinds of schools, word of mouth schools. You can look at schools in your neighborhood. You can look at schools in neighborhoods you'd like to travel to. They offer open houses. You'll hear a lot about open houses now for accepted students. I personally would call and say, hey, you're having this open house. I'm a 7th grade parent. Can I come? You never know, they might say yes. They may say no, but they might say yes. A tip and trick time, I would say a nice way, if you're looking closely at a school and you really want to get a feel for it before the fall, before the open houses start, see if they're hosting a play or an art show or a sporting event that's open to the public, that you can go check out the school, get a sense of the vibe. PTA meetings are open to the public. You can attend any one you want. You can't speak at them, but you are welcome to attend. So you can look up a school's PTA calendar and attend a meeting. Get a sense again for how strong the PTA is and what's going on and what events are happening. If you're interested in an arts school, start working on that portfolio. The portfolios are intense. My child did not apply to an art school, but I was looking through, and it's a lot of art that you have to do. It's a lot of thinking about it. It's you have a lot of time to work on it, but it's a lot. It's a true portfolio. Auditions too. There's a lot of things you have to do, prepare for a singing audition or for a drama audition. One nice thing is that there are summer enrichment programs that can help prepare for these. I think also for drama, you have to have a headshot. So it's a lot. So you're doing very well by just being here and learning all this stuff now. The DOE has a free summer program, not enough seats for everyone, but take a look at that. A really good idea for something to do over the summer. Maintaining good grades in 7th grade. Important. Again, they're not looking at individual grades. They're going to look at final report card grades in the 4 core subjects only. That's science, social studies, reading, and math. They will stop looking at grades at the end of, again, at 7th grade. 8th grade, fall grades, not important for public school. However, for private and parochial, they may and often do ask for that first marking period report card. So yeah, this is, yes, commute. Commute is a huge deal. High school is one of the largest differences between high school and middle school is that you are looking citywide. And commute, in my opinion, is not just about how long it takes to get to and from school, but how arduous that commute is, how complicated it is. You're going to know your child. You will think they cannot do this because they are 12 years old right now and 13 years old. And how on earth could they take 2 trains through Times Square and then a bus? They will, they do. There's lots of options. We can talk more about it. But they will surprise you at how quickly they start taking the train and the bus. But you may not want them to regardless. So you might want to look a little closer to home. A 1-hour commute on 1 bus is very different than a 35-minute commute on 2 buses and a train. So it's not just the amount of time, but the time is important. Is your child not a morning person? Is it going to be horrible to get them up every day at 6 in the morning? Things to consider when you're narrowing down your list. Jean posted an amazing pro and con list, commuting method. How hard would it be for you to get to the school if you needed to pick them up or bring a project or go to a PTA meeting? Where are friends going? Definitely something to think about. Number of students, what the homework is like. I will give you my tip and trick about asking about homework. Whenever anyone says, how much homework do you get? I say, well, that completely varies. It's not the right question because homework takes a different amount of time for every student. You have a very conscientious student who might take 4 hours to do the same thing one student might do in half an hour. I like to ask the school and the students who go there for sample assignments. What do assignments tend to be? Are they writing heavy? Are they research heavy? Are they project based? Are they, are there a lot of standardized tests? Those sorts of things that you can say, oh, my child is strong in that or less strong in that you can help you make the decision. That time of homework, you will get 10 different answers from the same school. One nice thing that the DOE has done is they've made a central calendar for open houses in the fall. Open house season is tough. It's a lot in the fall. I would not plan any vacations in the fall or any things to do because you will find all of a sudden 7 different open houses have popped up and you're going to want to go to them. What they're not great at is offering enough spots. You want to be aware of when those dates open. And so keep checking the calendar. They don't affirmatively tell you that a school has an open house. You kind of have to keep checking the DOE's calendar. And then when it pops up, register because they can't fit the thousands of people who want to come look at it in a single day. So sometimes they have multiple days, sometimes they don't. Another tip, during COVID, almost every school had a virtual tour that they made because they couldn't tour in person. So check YouTube for virtual tours of schools. You can do that over the summer. before the actual tours start, and you can get a good sense. There's Q&A, there's some of them tour the buildings. That's something you can look at.
I have a tip too, Deb. It's great to talk to other parents who has a child at a school that your child is thinking about. But I also strongly suggest talking to the kids, students that go to that current school, because they offer a very different perspective of what that school is like. And I'll give one example. My child is a seventh grader, and she's considering performing arts school. And one of the ones that she's thinking about, her friend told her one nice thing that they do at their school is they don't. It's a school-wide policy where they don't have the kids take all their tests on one day. So they try to spread out the tests. So the homework is one thing, but they won't slam the kids with 3 tests in one day, all in like the really tough core subjects. So little things like that, you get a sense from more from the students. So that's just something I wanted to put out there.
Yep, that's a great tip. So you really want to take a look at your child's strengths and weaknesses and ask questions based on that. You know, when they give tests, how often they give tests, are they standardized, are they written, are they computerized, are, you know, what's the project workload? Are some folks really dislike working or students dislike working in groups? Are there a lot of group work? Other kids love it. Really good questions, and absolutely you get the honest answer from the child. The student is the one in their room doing the homework, and they know that even though they've been in their room for 2 hours, they were on Instagram for an hour and a half. So you may think they're doing homework for 2 hours, but in reality, it was only half an hour of work. So the kids know best. Okay, we talked about the programs versus the schools. Okay, so when you apply, so you have 12 spots. And like I was saying, you have each program takes up a space. So even if it's in the same school, if there's multiple programs, they take up multiple spaces. This is also true for LaGuardia. You can apply to multiple art studios. You can apply to all of them if you like. You can apply to technical theater and violin and dance if you like. You will, and you can get multiple offers. If they love your set design and they love your violin and they love your dancing, theoretically you could get 3 different offers from LaGuardia. We talked about this. When you are looking, right, so you want to look at course offerings, small school, large school. There are pros and cons to small schools and large schools. Large schools are going to have more course offerings. They're going to be also large schools. I will say, personal experience wise, my son went from a very, very small school to a very, very large school. I was worried about that. I didn't need to be worried. We are very happy at a large school because within large schools, you have pockets and they find their niche. So, but you all know your children best. Sports are important to a lot of folks. Big schools tend to have more active and robust sports programs. Although most schools, in my experience, tend to pale in comparison to what the private and parochial schools can offer with sports. So here is an example from last year. We don't have the data yet from this year's admissions, so this is from last year's admissions. And you can take a look at the different tiers, what the cutoffs were. It was top 15%, again, either of your high school, your middle school, or of the city. If you make that cutoff in either respect, it doesn't have to be both. I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong. Is it and? No, I really thought it was or. I think it's or. But maybe it's and. We'll clarify
It
that
is an
before the time.
and. So you can see it has to be a minimum. So it must be greater than 90.
Okay, so you have
that-
to make, okay. Right, but it can be top, right, the or is on top, excuse me. The or is citywide or, but it has to also be above 90.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
right, that's the and the or. So
And each school is different.
right, each school, the citywide will be the same. Each school's top 15% will be different. But so we're showing the citywide cutoffs here because that's standard. Group 2 was at 89, group 3 at 82, group 4 is 76. Okay, lottery numbers. So thanks to the genius and kind heart of Amelie Marian, who broke the code, cracked the code. She is a fellow parent who also went through the high school process this year. She cracked the code and did a survey, which has been incredibly helpful. She does it every year and has figured out what the actual lottery numbers mean. So if you look at the top left, 00 says 0.4%. That means you have only 0.4% of students have a better number than you. So that's what the percentages mean. The same or better. And if you look all the way down to FF, that means you have 100% of the students have a better number than you. But you really, again, I'll say the first two numbers are the only two numbers that matter, even though there'll be a string of this hexadecimal number. Here's some examples of screen schools. You may have heard of some and not heard of others. These are schools that require an essay or a video. That is subject to change. The school might say we want to do an in-person exam, or the school might say we want to do a formal interview, and I should say all of this is subject to change. The DOE is it never gives a guarantee. In my experience thus far, paying attention to all this for many years and going through it, I do think it's going to be fairly stable, at least for next year. They are happy with the way the process has been going. So I think it's a fair, safe assumption that it will be similar to this year and the year before. These are the cutoffs that I mentioned about the Shizat. So Stuyvesant, you can see at the top that the lowest score to get into Stuyvesant was a 561. And then at the bottom, you have Brooklyn Latin. So the lowest possible score was 493. And for the Discovery program, you only have to, if you're eligible for Discovery, you have to score close to that 493. But you could get into any of the other schools. So so that's something to keep in mind. We talked about that. Diversity in admissions, we talked about a little bit. There's a list at this URL. You can see which schools and what the percentage of seats they set aside are. Eleanor Roosevelt, for example, is a very, very popular high school, very coveted high school in District 2 in Manhattan. It used to be Manhattan priority. Now it is no longer Manhattan priority, so anyone from the city can apply. But they hold 50% of their seats for DIA students. So if you are not eligible for diversity in admissions, you're only looking at 50% of the seats that you can apply for. Some good examples. So you have student 1, and they've got a 95 average in their 4 core subjects. They are in the top 15% of their school and the top 15% in the city, so they are in group 1. Student 2, GPA is 91, and they're not in the top 15% of their school, but they are in the top 15% in the city. So that's the or that I was talking about. Either one. So they're still in group 1 because they have above a 90, and that's that minimum that Yatin was talking about. And they have only one of the 15% requirement. Student 3 has a 90, makes that requirement, but they are in neither the top 15% of their school nor the top 15% in the city. So they are in group 2. And then student 4 has an 88, and they would be then in group 3. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about before we get to Q&A is the class size law. I don't know how many of you know, but a law was passed a couple of years ago that has changed the maximum number of students allowed in each classroom. So it has lowered the class size, and it is a mandatory law that the DOE has to comply with by 2027. Two more years they have. Sorry, 3 more years they have, 2027, to comply. This is presents a lot of challenges, but in terms of admissions, it is something that is going to affect every admission cycle after this current one. So starting in September. One thing that has been very helpful on my schools is they show you the number of applicants per seat. So if you have 8 applicants for every seat, that's different than 26 applicants per seat. The 26 applicants per seat is going to be harder to get into than the 8 applicants per seat. I'm not sure how the DOE is going to manage next year because due to this class size law, many schools may have to cut their enrollment to comply with the law. They will not have space in their building and they will not have space built yet to comply with the class size law, which many of them are going to have to do come 2025 September, when your kids will be starting high school. Therefore, the only thing that the principals will be able to do is to cut enrollment. I've heard estimates of 20-25% at some schools, particularly the most overcrowded, which tend to be the most popular schools. It's concerning. Many of us have been advocating for alternative solutions. I can give you all the information you want on that, and we can talk about it some more in the Q&A. It's something that I believe parents need to be asking the DOE all the time, and finding out from the principals what they plan on doing, because they're going to have to make those decisions by the fall, by the time admissions opens. So, and that's going to continue if you're younger than 7th grade. That's important for you all to know as well. Please, Place NYC has been doing a lot of advocacy in this area. We have lots of ideas on how we can avoid cutting seats at popular programs. In particular, this is also going to affect zone schools tremendously, not to mention the availability of AP classes and arts programs in schools. There's a lot of fallout from this, which we can talk about, but please follow Place for any actions that we might have. And I think that brings us to Q&A.
Just to add on to that, Deb, the
Yeah.
8th grade, current 7th, there's no change for current 8th grade parents that are moving up to high school. But we do anticipate pain happening with current 7th grade parents if the law is not amended or addressed. So it is something to be concerning. My child goes to a large middle school and it's popular, and I'm on the SLT there, and I've asked our school admin and what the estimate might be if they had to comply with the law today. Worst case scenario, they confirmed 20 to 30%. So that is a real number, and it is something that they don't know what to do. They say that there's no plan yet from the DOE, but once that plan drops, expect a lot of noise coming from Place, and hopefully other parents and other advocacy groups as well, because it's really going to be a disaster.
And the onus is actually not on the DOE. The DOE has been asking the state, hey, what are you guys doing? We can't do this. You wrote a law that we simply cannot comply with. The onus is on the legislators at this point to make amendments to the law, not repeal the law, but make some amendments to make it so that there doesn't have to be these trade-offs. So contacting your legislators is going to be a big action that we're going to be hopefully rolling out soon. And if you happen to talk to your legislators, talk to your SLTs, ask your principal what their plans are, go to the schools you're interested in, the high schools, say what's the plan? Do you know how many seats you're going to have for next year? Can you comply with the class size law? These are all great questions. All principals have been surveyed. So at this point, they should know whether or not they can comply with the law, or how many seats they have to cut. So good questions to be asking of all of these folks.
Yes, and it's not as if one school could ask for an exemption, because there is an exemption clause within the law. It's not as if one school could just say, you know what, I think we're good. We're not going to ask for any exemptions. We're just going to lose 20% of our seats, because if you live in a school district, particularly just about every single school district in Queens, 24, 25, 26, 28, and possibly parts of 30, it is a nightmare because if one school decides they want to cut seats, it has a ripple effect and a cascading effect with all the other schools because the students that were expecting to go to that school, where now you're losing 20% of the seats, they may have nowhere to go. So it really is something, especially if you're in District 20, District 2, most districts in Queens, to pay attention to.
Yeah, particularly also in the zone schools, not just the popular screen schools, but Francis Lewis High School and Forest Hills High School, Cardozo. Those schools serve a lot of zoned kids who may no longer be able to go to their zoned high school. So because they are at already 200% capacity. So it's concerning. It's something that I'm sad to bring to your attention, but I hope that together we can make enough noise that because we do have a plan. We have been talking about how the DOE can implement it if there are amendments to the law. But let's get to Q&A.
Hey, Deborah, you want to unshare? It'll probably be a little easier to.
Sure. Yes.
Great.
All right.
And what we do is if you want to raise your hand, and we'll call people by the order of the raised hand, and you will ask your question.
Yatin, we have a few questions from the chat, so
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
we
Do you
can answer
wanna-
those first. Yeah. One is, this is coming from, I believe, an 8th grade parent, is can we change the program of the applied school? So once you've applied to a school, let's say you've applied to a program, the Gen Ed program at Forest Hills, and you want to now switch to the Carl Sagan program. Can you switch programs within a school?
Yes. In terms of so my question is, do you mean after you've been admitted or before you've been accepted? I'll give you both answers. That will depend on the school. I think some schools allow you to leave one program, and I think some schools don't. It's definitely a question for the individual school, what their policy is. I'm sure there's not a one-size-fits-all answer. If you were asking about in the application period, yes, you have up until the application closes to change your mind. And again, maybe a little after if you ask your guidance counselor.
Yeah. Well, I'll share that. In Queens, Bayside High School has many different programs. My sister, my niece went through it, and they were pretty firm in terms of, you apply to a program, you get into a program, and that's it. You don't get to switch. A lot of the larger popular schools, that are tough to get into in terms of seats that they have available, it will be hard. But for schools and programs where there maybe have just, more seats, that probably will be more flexible.
I have heard that the Carl Sagan program, you really can't move into that program once you've once you apply to the school. But a lot of high schools are flexible in terms of once you get into the school, then you're in the school and you have access and leeway to a lot of the other offerings that they have there.
Any other?
Next question.
Yeah.
How do IEPs fit into specialized and general school acceptances?
Great question. So if you heard earlier, I mentioned that one of the set aside categories is for students with disabilities. So this is not included in specialized high schools. Specialized high schools, again, only one factor, and that's your score on the Shazat. That said, specialized high schools have plenty of students with IEPs. My son has a 504. He's at a specialized school. We have had no issues with his accommodation. But it doesn't factor into admissions. For screen schools and general schools, essentially, if you have diversity in admissions, or you have if you have student with disability designation, you are applying only with students in that designation. So when you look in my schools, it'll say 12 applicants per seat for Gen Ed, but it'll say 6 applicants per seat SWD, students with disabilities. So you are applying basically in a parallel process. You're not competing with kids without IEPs, and the kids without IEPs aren't competing with the kids with IEPs. So it is a slightly separate process. Let me know if you have any more questions about that.
I think if you have a child with an IEP, when you're considering schools, it's really important to talk to families there with regards to how IEPs are serviced, because if your child is twice exceptional, they may not get some of the services you're thinking. And some schools, some high schools like Townsend Harris are much better suited for children that are twice exceptional. So that is something that I would strongly suggest talking to families, other families with IEPs, or other Facebook groups out there that that kind of specialize in this area. So it is something that you have to definitely do the legwork on. Next question: would specialized high schools also be affected for current seventh graders? And this is referring to enrollment truncations per the class size mandate.
Yes, they will certainly be affected, because if I'm thinking of every single specialized high school, I mean, I don't know about Staten Island Tech, I'm sorry to say, but there's no space, no excess space within the school that would allow for the class sizes in those schools tend to be up in the 30s, 34, and the new class size for maximum for high school is going to be 25. So for every class that's over 25, you have to now open a new classroom. And the schools, as they are now, Brooklyn Tech is overflowing with students, 6,000 students. There are many schools on shifts. So like Brooklyn Tech will start shift 1 starts at 7:30 and goes until 2:30, and shift 2 starts at 8:15 and goes until 4:15, due to the overcrowding, which is an issue. But because there's no room to build, there's no space to find within the school, and a school takes 4 to 5 years to build, if they can even find the space. They also have to hire new teachers during a national teacher shortage, and they have to find the money to do all of this. That's not going to happen. So the only answer is that they're going to have to cut enrollment to allow for those additional classrooms for the current students to fit into, so that they can comply. That's going to be their only option. I'm pretty sure every specialized high school has no space. There are schools, just to give context, there are many schools that are under-enrolled. That's where I fear that students will just be placed. If they don't get anything on their list, they're going to be the DOE has to provide you a high school seat. And all of these students who are now zoned out or cut out of the seats that are cut out are just going to be placed at these under-enrolled schools anywhere in the city. It's concerning.
There's a question here. I'm not sure. I'll just
Go ahead, just ask.
I'll just say, why doesn't the DOE release the results earlier to align timing wise with private and parochial school results? So many families are being forced to look at alternatives to public school because of the current crazy lottery system. So as the system stands, family must put down non-refundable deposits at private and parochial schools while they wait for public school results. I am sure DOE is well aware of this and does this on purpose. Thoughts?
They are well aware of it. I don't believe they do it on purpose. The only reason would be to make parents spend money. I don't think the DOE has any interest in that. The Office of Enrollment has gone through the timeline with me. By the time everything gets in December and you rank your choices, schools have until sometime in January to go through all of the screening. LaGuardia, I think this year, was doing callbacks through the beginning of February. The specialized high schools, yes, you have a single test. It is on a Scantron. They can get those results really fast.
It'll be online next year.
It'll be online next year. Yeah,
it'll be computerized. Yes.
Yep. There you go.
It'll be
they can have it in a day.
Marked.
Yes. But a lot of the other schools, the schools with assessments, take longer, and then it has to be verified, and then it has to go to the principals, and the principals have to make sure, yes, these are the students we asked for, and goes back and forth. Meanwhile, the DOE is also conducting kindergarten applications, 3K, pre-K, middle school. So they are back-to-back admissions processes high school is first. So high school ends December, let's say December 1st. Then you have middle school that's going to end December 15th. And then you have kindergarten applications, and then pre-K, and then 3K. So they're busy. It's not an excuse. It's a terrible system. Honestly, I blame the private and parochial schools. They know what they're doing. They're the ones who get the money. They know when public school results come out, and they purposely get those deposits. You know, it's a capitalist move, and they are a for-profit enterprise, so it is what it is. But I do believe the DOE that they can't really get it out much sooner than they already are, given those factors.
Okay, that's it for questions from the chat. If anybody has a question and wants to raise their hand.
I am going to put my email in the chat if anyone wants to contact me.
That's very generous of you, Deborah. Because
Sure.
I get the sense that people have questions but just
Yeah.
don't want to ask. But please ask. Or if you want, you can type the questions in chat if that's easier for you. I've done this event for a different group of parents, for Mandarin speaking parents, and we had like an hour and a half of questions. So I would think,
Oops.
I'm trying to think of what other random things, if no one has questions. I told you I've been through it twice. It's not pretty, but it is not the worst, and you get through it. And then you have to wait. The waiting is the worst because you finish in December, and then you have to wait until March, and the waiting was probably the worst part of it all. Is there any possibility of DOE releasing lottery numbers earlier? I am a member of the Citywide Council on High Schools, and we asked them this very question, last week when they were at our meeting, and they said no. We're going to follow up with them. I think they released lottery numbers basically because of the parent advocacy of Amelie and others.
Place. I was going to say that, Deborah,
Place.
that Place was the group that even got us the lottery numbers. They were not giving it. We started foiling it. We started asking parents to submit emails to the DOE and foil it. And they got a number of them and decided it was just much easier to just publish it.
Because information is power. And I think the DOE doesn't want to give parents a lot of power, and they don't want us looking and saying, well, what are the cutoffs here and there, and trying to game the system and all of that. And it's not gaming the system. It's knowing what is reasonable. If they want you to create a balanced application, you have to know what makes sense for your child. So
can you please post your email again?
Yes.
So there's a question that asks about how lottery numbers work with screen schools. So I'm happy to explain that. For screen schools, screen academic schools, we went through the different groups, group 1, group 2, group 3, and based on the 7th grade final GPA of the 4 subjects, you know, we talked about what made the cutoff this year, and it may change next year. So from, let's say it's 93, group 1's 93 to 99.5, let's say, all those students will be in group 1. Many of those students will apply to the most popular schools. You know, I want to say schools like Townsend and Bard and Beacon, and, you know, all the schools that you know, many of you probably have heard of. Well, if you have students that are from 93 to 99, all in a pool, the student that has the higher or the better, I want to say the better lottery number, will have a higher chance of getting a seat at their top choice. That's really how it works, and it's not pretty, and that's why I'm not a huge fan of this group thing. So I'll be honest. And you know, children, our students who, let's say, have a 97 may not get their top choice, while their friend, their classmate who has a 94 will get their top choice. And that will be based on just how good their lottery number is. So that's in a nutshell how lottery numbers are used.
In
Now,
addition,
so one
I-
more thing. So the way, if you have a not so great lottery number, there are schools that Deborah had already went through that uses additional assessments. Those additional assessments will help you in terms of getting a better shot at your top schools. So Deborah, did you have
Yeah.
something to add?
no, because just what you said, because now they're looking at two factors. So those screen schools tend to take pretty much tier 1 kids. So that's just your foot in the door, is that tier 1. And then they're going to grade the essay or look at the audition or watch the video to see where you are. And they'll give you a score, give the student a score. And then they'll look at those scores and they'll start, if they give 99s, then they'll look at all the 99s, and the lottery number will then break the tie of those 99s of those tier 1 students. So I look at the tiers as just the ticket of admission. And the other thing I was going to add to what Yatin was saying that makes it unfair is that they're looking at averages from completely different schools. So, middle school A might not be nearly as rigorous. You can get a 99 in school A and a 91 at school B, and they're not apples to apples. And then you get a good lottery number with a 91, and you're looking at a student who maybe is not the best suited for such a rigorous high school environment, but they take a seat from a student at a rigorous school, So,
I
but
do know
this,
some, I
Yeah.
do know somebody, very poor lottery number, 100 GPA, and this child could not get into Townsend Harris. And it was everything related to the lottery number. The lottery number was not, it was somewhere in the 60th percentile.
yeah.
So this is where Amelie's the crowdsourcing that she's been doing for from 8th grade parents on lottery numbers and what schools they got accepted to, where it really helps, because it helps to understand what the cutoff is for the schools in terms of what lottery number you received.
So this dovetails nicely with Lisa Marx's question. She asks, given that the essays and videos and things are done at home, and obviously can be helped by parents or tutors or whoever, are there any plans for high schools to return to in-person essay writing or samples? Why or why not? And that is on the plus side, the DOE is allowing schools individually to determine their admissions procedures, which I think is better than when they did a one-size-fits-all during COVID. So the ball is in the school's court. I know Baccalaureate School for Global Education had in-person assessments this year, which included essays, it included a problem-solving task. They did screen initially with a video, but from those videos, they did then go into in-person assessments. Definitely, it's up to each school. It's difficult to do with so many kids applying, thousands and thousands of kids applying. An in-person assessment is tricky. It's difficult, especially when you're looking at, you have to do it all between December 1st and a January deadline with break in the middle. It's complicated, but they used to do it. So there's no reason that they couldn't, and some actually do. So I would ask that question of the individual schools. The smaller class size, yeah.
Sorry, we skipped over one question. Is it true that a child may have no offers at all? What happens in this case?
So if you list all 12, if you fill up all 12, you have a very small percentage of not getting any of your 12. A small percentage don't, but it's a small percentage. But many people list 4 or 5 or 6. And if those schools, if the child isn't suited, either based on assessment, or they are not realistic grade-wise, or their lottery number is terrible and you only list 4 or 5 schools, the DOE will, in that column of 12, will assign you to a random school. Not random. They say that they attempt to find a school near your house. That's not always possible. But it is leaving it in the hands of the DOE to place you somewhere where there's a seat. So it is, they recommend that you find 12 that you're interested in.
In which case, if you get to that point, I would call everybody, get your CEC involved, make phone calls to your city council member, your assembly member, your state senator, the borough president, and just really, you really have to push to see to if you're in that circumstance. I do think that the boroughs have been, Manhattan used to be horrible. I do think it's getting a little better, but it's and it's starting to become a little bit more rare, but it still does happen.
Yeah, it's a higher percentage of not getting something on your list if you don't list 12. If you list 12, but frankly, in my opinion, if you are just putting schools in your 6 through 12 slot just to fill it out, it's not that much better than if you're just getting randomly placed. But if you can find something you can live with, it's going to be better than where they randomly place you. Emery asks, the smaller class size requirement starts September 2025. So yes, and just to explain it a little further, that it started this year, technically. They were supposed to start, the DOE has to phase in the class size mandate, 20% of the total seats in New York every year. So this year's school, they already met the 20%, that 20% of schools are compliant with the class size law. Just naturally, those are those under-enrolled schools I was telling you about. Next year, as in September 2024, is the second year of the phase-in, and they just barely make it. So 40% of the schools will be compliant. They didn't have to cut enrollment for this coming September. However, the third year, which is September of 2025, they're supposed to be 60% compliant, and that they are not prepared for. There will have to be changes for that incoming year. It's not 100%, but compliant, but they'll have to have 20% more schools compliant at that size at that year. So
we have a question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
We have a question. Sumitra Bajpai, do you want to ask your question?
Oh, yeah, your hand is raised. You can ask it or we can read it.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Hi.
Sorry, I actually typed it in the chat as well. Can you speak about the AP exams and how the credits are awarded for college?
Sure.
And as well as can you speak about the Regents exams? We heard a lot of changes are happening with respect to the Regents exams as well.
I like this. This is a even further forward thinker. I know this because I have an 11th grader, so I have been looking into colleges already. And the answer is it depends. Every college is different. The amount of AP credits, if they accept AP credits, how many credits they'll accept, whether they accept them as credits or as prerequisites varies by college. So you have to look at each individual college. The most important thing that I'll tell you that I've learned so far in this area is you want your child to take the most rigorous courses that your school offers. So if your school offers 30 APs, the more APs you take, the more you show that you're taking the most rigorous courses you can. If your school doesn't offer APs, or if your school only offers honors, or if they don't have anything, or they only have 3 APs because they're a small school, colleges don't want to penalize you just because your school didn't offer 30 APs. But if they see you're taking the most rigorous, most challenging courses that your school offers, that's what they like to see. But in terms of how it works at the college, it varies completely by the college. Ivy League colleges tend not to accept anything after an AP course. You take an AP exam at the end and it's scored 1 through 5, and Ivy League colleges generally don't take under a 5 or a 4. SUNY schools will generally accept a 3 or a 4, 3 or higher on the exam for credit. It varies by school. And as far as Regents, we don't know what the changes yet are. The Regents are working on it. As of now, Regents are still a thing. Kids are taking their Regents. So I'm not sure if you have a clarifying question about the regions, but right now there has been no official change to the regions. Stay
Yeah,
tuned.
Deb, we have
I
an-
think, yeah, what they're signaling, if you, you know, we read a lot about this, is that they may probably just offer more pathways of graduation and not necessarily remove the use of Regents test as an exit exam. That's what we're seeing, but as Deborah said, nothing official has been released by the Department of Education in the state.
we have another question from the chat. Do schools offer wait lists? How does that process work?
Yep. So the waitlist process is if anyone was around earlier there years ago, there used to be an appeal. So they'd have the first round and then you could appeal. That was replaced by the waitlist, and the DOE will automatically place a student on the waitlist of any school that you didn't get. If you got your third choice, they will place you on the waitlist for the school in slots 1 and 2. The good news is, if you had a terrible lottery number, you have a shot at getting a better lottery number because your waitlist lottery number is completely different than your initial application lottery number. So you might have had a terrible lottery number, but now suddenly you're number 2 on the waitlist for your number 1 school. So there's a lot of hope when it comes to waitlists. There's a lot of movement with waitlists. Waitlists are open all summer. There's a lot of movement up until the the acceptance dates. So you have to this year you have to accept your school by April 5th. But there still is movement after that. People decide, nope, I'm going to go with my private school. Nope, I'm going to move to the suburbs. Nope, I'm going to, do something else. There's a lot of movement still. But it mostly is in that first month when people are deciding. Also, people get multiple offers. So you can have an offer to Eleanor Roosevelt from your main list. Then you get an offer to Bronx High School of Science. And then you get 3 offers to LaGuardia for music and dance and art. So you can only go to 1 high school and 1 program. So come April 5th, you're going to be releasing 4 out of those 5 offers. And suddenly someone on the wait list is going to get an offer. There are, but I shouldn't have said Bronx Science because there are no wait lists for specialized high schools. That's the only schools that do not have a wait list. Vanessa asked, are you automatically added to wait lists of schools you didn't get into? Yes, if you rank them higher, not the ones lower. So if I got my first choice, they're not adding me to the wait lists of the schools below. If I got my 6th choice, they're adding me to choices 1 through 5. But you can manually, after you get your acceptance letter, add yourself to any wait list. The tricky thing with that is that if you didn't do an assessment and you want to add yourself to Beacon's wait list, you're going to be behind everyone who had an assessment. Who did the essay for Beacon, basically. If you want to go to Francis Lewis High School, you're going to be behind all of the zoned kids. So the wait lists move up and down as people add and take away, because you might be number 24 on a wait list and then someone comes in who got a higher score on their audition, and now they have just bumped you back in line. So the wait lists are dynamic. They're not perfect. They're not great, but they are, a lot of kids do get into schools that they're happy with from the wait lists.
Does anyone else have any questions?
One more question.
Yeah.
Can you apply for the specialized high schools even if you are not living in the city? Like if you're not a part of New York?
Yes. As long as you live in New York City, if you or are moving to New York City. So the test is in November. There is also a test for people who are moving to New York City. They can take the specialized high school test in August. Also, I have heard if you are coming in from another state where your child was already at, if you're coming in a different grade, let's say 10th grade, and you were at Thomas Jefferson in Virginia, you can, it's possible to get a seat at a specialized high school if there is one available. that's a very individual basis sort of application. But if you're moving to New York City and you go to school in New Jersey right now, but you're coming and you have a New York City address, you can sign up to take the test. Yes.
You actually can attend a New York City public school and pay tuition as a non-resident, but as a non-resident, you cannot attend a specialized high school, a screen school, or a G&T program, or 3K or pre-K.
Yeah, that's I've heard that, and I've never known anyone to do that.
It's
So,
actually on their website, and you
Yeah.
wouldn't believe the tuition. It's kind of pricey.
You might as well just go to a private school in your town.
Yes.
Emery wants to know how much. I don't know. How much is it, Jean?
I think it's around the $40,000 range.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it makes sense because you're not paying taxes into the school system. So why would you be getting the services of a place where you didn't live? Yeah, but yes, go private for sure. Yes, and don't commute in from Connecticut. Much as
Oh,
I love.
I found it. It's actually 5,425 for gen ed and 48,392 for special ed.
Ah, interesting. Can you remind us of the timeline for seventh graders who aren't applying to a specialized school but would like to apply to screen schools? Yes. So the timeline for all of those are the same. You apply at the same time. There are, in my schools online, they are two separate tabs, if you will, but the timeline is the same. So it'll open in September, most likely sometime in September, hopefully earlier the better in September. And then open houses will start, and usually in October. And the specialized high school test is late November, and then the whole application process closes at the same time in December. Although actually, no, one other change for specialized is that you have to, when you take the test, you have to rank. So your specialized high school choices are locked in when you take the test, which is usually a little bit before the application closes, but usually closes around beginning of December.
I want to just provide a word of advice for those interested in specialized high schools. Please rank all 8 testing schools. I realize that it sounds ridiculous if you're in Queens and you put down Staten Island Tech, but I get enough sob stories of parents that said, oh, you know, if I had only put down Brooklyn Latin, if I had only put down, please just put it down. Rank all 8, do it in your order of preference. And as Deborah already said, look, if you put Stuyvesant 4th and you know, you did score high enough, you're going to get, you know, Brooklyn Tech or Bronx Science. But I just, there is no downside. Just put it down.
That's right. It's great advice, because if you find yourself without a school, you'll wish you have done it, and there's absolutely
And
no
you
doubt.
may want to move to Staten Island or South Brooklyn. I'm just saying, I hear desperation from parents in these situations, and I just want to just give that to you. No downside, just put
You
it
said
down.
a very important phrase, Yatin: rank in true order of preference. It is the mantra of the applicant. There is no gaming. No school is going to deny you or preference you because you put them first or didn't put them first. Those are myths. It does not happen. You will hear that only with regard to Stuyvesant, because Stuyvesant is always the top. It's not that they won't accept you if you don't put them first. If you don't put them first, you just won't get Stuyvesant, because if you score into Stuyvesant, you're going to get whatever you by default score into the one that you put first. So that's the only actual truth about putting something first. True order of preference, always, always, always. There's no gaming this. They do not see, the schools themselves do not see your order. They I promise you they don't. Jenny has
Next. Oh, no, we actually have a question in chat first. About when do open house signups become available? Is it over the summer?
I wish.
I think it's
no. Go ahead, Jean.
I think it's since they start in September after school begins, and that's when principals kind of lay out the schedule for the year.
I think it's after the I think it's after the application opens, which has been closer to the end of September. So the majority of them are in October, but and some go into November as well. Occasionally in the spring, some schools check the calendar on the DOE. Some of them have open houses in the spring. They used to do it more often prior to COVID, and then they stopped. But again, if you didn't hear, check out those virtual tours, virtual open house on YouTube. If there's a particular school you want to look at, there's a ton of stuff that's great to look ahead of time.
One more question from the chat. Will you do a similar session for middle school admissions? I think we did one.
We
Not
have
yet.
been, I don't remember it because I do so many of these since COVID and since admissions have fluctuated, changed so much. Yeah, I mean, we've said that we're gonna do one for every grade band in terms of the admissions. So we'll do this one. You know, this is the first time we did it for 7th grade parents. At this time frame, we usually do it when the you know, when the
In the
admissions
fall, yeah.
open. So we'll do it again when you're in 8th grade, and you can tell
Yeah.
parents about it.
Middle school has gotten a lot less complicated because now so many have dropped the screening. So it's a lot less complicated, and now the screening is just grades. So it's you either have 4s or you don't. So it's gotten a lot less complicated. High school is the most complicated of them all.
We have a question from Jenny.
Yes.
Hi, ladies. I just have a question regarding lottery numbers. And I know you mentioned that this has been an ongoing discussion with the DOE. There are a group of parents on this Zoom that have been pretty active and vocal with DOE this year. And we have asked that question as well. What do you think is the reasoning that they don't want to release them earlier? Because I know for a lot of us, you know, everybody is so concerned about what tier their child is going to fall in, and that's going to determine their, you know, the probability of them getting into certain programs. And obviously having an idea of where your kid is at the end of 7th grade, plus that lottery number, will really give parents a better idea earlier, kind of what to expect. So I don't understand why they wouldn't want to release those. It seems strange. It's a computer generated number. They should be able to do that.
Part of it is that I think they don't run the algorithm. They don't run the lottery numbers until September. Of course, they could run it earlier. I hear what you're saying. I think they don't want to attenuate it from they don't want it to be disconnected from the whole process. So if I'm being charitable to them, I think it makes the most sense to release everything all at once. So you have the full context. You'll have what tier your child's in, what lottery number they have, you know, what their DIA is, all of that all at once, which does make some sense. And then if you get me on a less charitable day, I will say, I think they didn't want to do this in the first place. We forced their hand to do it in the first place. And it's because they don't want the headaches that come with parents knowing too much. So if they release this, now they're going to have a ton of calls going, oh, my lottery number is this, or, oh, can I go see this school? Because now I know I can go here. And then schools are closed in the summer. So what good does it do you? But I hear you. I would want I think this process should start. The high school, that the application should open in June. That's my opinion.
Agree.
Those are my thoughts on it. Yeah.
I just think a lot of us feel that our kids would have a better chance, you know, of being placed properly. And if it really is not going to work out in the public school system for our kids, to see what our other choices are. I mean, it's just a lot to be confronted with all in the fall. And I just feel like if there are things that the DOE can, you know, they can literally flip a switch and give us our numbers. So why not just do that? It's
I
crazy.
Agree with you. I think they would, if it was to be proposed, it would have to be to have the process open then, because I don't think they'd want to disconnect the two. They'd have to run it. And in their defense, they do go up into June with all their other applications. So by the time 3K is released, it's got to be close to June. So then to go right into, and then they have summer rising that they also work on. So I hear you, you're right. But I do hear that it would, you know, they're also very busy, and to start the process, it used to be that they never knew from year to year what the process was going to be. Now that it's more stable, it would make a little more sense. I agree with you to have the summer to plot out your options, your A, B, C plans, 100%. To start that in September. I mean, we're all here because you're starting it now anyway. You're going to have your plan A, plan B, plan C. But it would be very helpful to know that as soon as possible.
And
I'll-
Deborah,
Yeah.
and Deborah, I wanted to ask you, because I sat on some of the community education council, so I've seen you and listened. And so, yeah, I mean, the other question I have is, I guess, oh my gosh, this is funny. I just lost my train of thought with this. I'll come back to you.
We're here, not going anywhere.
Yeah, we used to focus strictly on public schools, and it's this year we started adding, just a little bit of information about private and parochial and charter in terms of just timelines and tests that you need to think about, because we feel we've gone through this with parents, since they started changing things up, and I just felt like it's really unfair. And for parents that want to explore other options besides public schools, they should at least be aware of timelines and mandatory requirements so that you can, have that option to plan. But we're on your side. We've been trying to push them to, move things ahead, give us certainty, give the lottery numbers. It's, I'm a 7th grade parent, so I'm going into this now for real for my
As
own
am I.
child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about
Goodness.
Manhattan Priority?
It is
Back.
something that there's a lot going on. If you're paying attention, CC2, I believe, has been doing a lot of action on this. We advocated, and the Queens and Brooklyn retained the geographic
Right.
priority when they were trying to knock it down. And I want to say Manhattan parents were very charitable and generous at that time. They gave it up that year, the CCs. And now Manhattan parents do not have any geographic priority. But there are folks that are trying to bring it back. So you'll be hearing from us, as well as from, mostly CEC2 that is trying to move the needle. I don't know if it's going to happen next year, but, we're trying to do the work.
Great. Thank you.
Sumitra asked another forward-thinking question about associate degree versus AP. How do they progress to full bachelor's from associate? How widely is the associate recognized? So I assume you mean doing like an early college program where you would receive your associate's degree. So as far as I know, and again, this is a college question for the four-year colleges. It's not necessarily the associate degree that will transfer. It's all the credits. So yes, you get an associate's degree that you could then go out into the world and work with that associate's degree. But if you want to go to a four-year college, you've now had 2 years under your belt of credits. So again, it'll depend on the college, what they recognize and what they want to accept. Colleges want you to pay for their classes. So very often they will cap the number of credits that you can bring in with you. It's hard to plan that way, which is why I talked about the rigor of the classes being important. Obviously, if you go to an early college program like Bard or what else is really all the early
Hunter
yes,
science,
Hunter,
yeah.
right. They're going to know that you're taking rigorous classes, which is good. But yeah, that's a personal preference. And it's also, I think, at least for when I considered them for my kids, it was you're doing high school in 2 or 3 years, depending on the school. Is your child up for that kind of acceleration and perhaps the loss of clubs or activities or, extracurriculars, because the workload there is definitely moving more quickly because they're getting to college level work in the 3rd and 4th year. So
I'll share this, and this information is a little dated, but my older child, she had a friend that went to Bard, and they were at McGill. I'll just say it's a Canadian school, but McGill took the 2 full years. So that student finished her bachelor's at McGill in 2 years and was able to go on and do her master's in speech pathology in 4 years, and she saved 2 years of tuition. So that's just an instance where they were able to maximize everything that Bard had to offer and be able to save money and get her bachelor's in just 2 years. Every school is going to be different. If that's important to you and your family, you should look around. But
Yeah,
it's
for
a
sure.
great
And
option.
and look at colleges. If you're already thinking about colleges, you might have an idea, and you can Google, what they tend to accept and everything, in making the decision. But it's good. Matoko asks, what are good charter schools? That is a little beyond my knowledge. And I think it's a very personal decision. A lot of opinions on charter schools, and I think you really have to go and see. Similarly, if you're looking at charter, private, parochial, do you want a big school? Do you want a small school? What's their graduation rate? What classes do they offer? Where do they go to college? Where do they send kids to college? Same questions. But
I don't know. I don't know that I've heard actually a lot of charter high schools.
Not
7
that
to
many,
8?
Jean. You're correct. A
Yeah.
lot of the schools want you to have started in their system, in their charter earlier. I want to say Success, which is a large, charter school, it tends to be that way. I don't think they allow kids to just come in high school. The only one that I've heard of that starts at high school that will take you is Vertex, which started in the Bronx a couple of years ago. But we're you have to do a little research on charters. We're not all experts on that.
Yeah. With Sumitra asks, with the removal of affirmative action by the Supreme Court, can the schools still reserve seats on the basis of FRL? Good question. Yes, they can. Income is not a protected class, so they are able to use that in admissions.
Absolutely. And actually that's one of the ways in which some of the colleges are thinking of switching to. So instead of race-based affirmative action, colleges are exploring other ways of affirmative action, including income levels.
Yep.
This is something I have a question for Deb and Yatin that I never understood. All of New York City is eligible for free and reduced lunch. So how would they know?
You fill
Um,
out a
all of
lunch
New York
form.
City.
So Jean, they've basically given all students like free lunch, right? You don't have to
Right.
fill out anything to eat lunch. But they do, if you pay attention, your school asks you to fill out the income form. And that's what they go off by. Now, my understanding is that I don't think anyone's checking your tax returns with what you put down. And I'm hearing some chatter in groups that, parents think other parents wouldn't be qualified, but somehow they got a seat through Discovery. It's very shady. I'm just sharing with you that's what they're going by. They're going by the lunch forms that you fill out. So whether your school gives free lunch, and I think you're right, all schools in New York City is giving kids lunch. There's no more like, you don't have to pay for anything, but you have to fill out that form.
So yes,
yeah.
the federal form used to be called the free reduced price lunch, FRPL form. In essence, it's not. It's like Yatin said, it's an income form. They're asking for your income, and it used to the byproduct of that was, when with this income, do you qualify? It would have to be a real big concerted effort because Discovery goes not based on a personal income, it goes based on your middle school. So you'd have to get all your middle school, like all of the parents or enough parents to make the middle school eligible for Title I.
And your family.
But yeah, so they ask for these forms, you can fill them out. It still is it's not just for free lunch though. So you should fill them out, because if your school has over 60% of families who qualify, they get millions of dollars in Title I funds. So it's important that they are filled out. even though they don't really pertain to lunch anymore, but they're still
Yeah.
called the free reduced price lunch. It's just what we're used to calling it.
So absolutely. So your school, if a certain percent higher than 60%, you get Title I funding, which is very helpful for our schools. The other thing is we went over the DIA. There are many high schools that give preference or set aside seats if you meet the FRL eligibility. So there's that. And also, for the specialized high schools, if you attend a school that meets the ENI and your family income is makes you eligible, you will, you may have a seat at the specialized high school at a lower score because of the Discovery program. And there are 20% of specialized high school seats that are set aside for Discovery.
Any more questions? I don't see any more in the chat. I think that
Okay.
we're
Please
done.
reach out. Like, absolutely. I don't find me on Facebook. Email me. Come to the next place meeting. Like, reach out. It's a lot. We should do this again in the fall when you're actually applying and when we have more information about a lot of this stuff. But it's a lot, but you'll be okay. I promise. I did it twice.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I'm just going to wrap this up. Thank you, everyone who stayed until 9:13 on a Tuesday evening to plan for your child's,
Can I just
high
ask a
school
question?
admissions. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So families that have FRL, that
Mhm.
means even if they say we're in like the lowest lottery number, they would jump to the top of the line then?
Not exactly. What that means is that if you are in FRL or eligible for DIA, you are now in the pool of people that are competing for the 25% or 35 or 50% of seats that qualify, that are set aside for people with DIA.
So my understanding is that every high school is 50% of the seats is set aside for the FRL or DIA.
Not every. It's on the list of schools that have the diversity admissions. So it's only for those schools, and the percentage they set aside is different per school.
It's
when you-
actually not a ton of them.
Yeah, when you go to my schools and if you go to the browse where you can browse the different schools, it comes up as one of the check boxes if you want a school that has DIA.
I do think it's a lot of the D2, like highly desired schools
Yes.
that do have the DIA, just
That's
FYI.
correct, Jenny. Manhattan was very generous in putting their great schools, for the rest of the city.
I mean, some of them are as much as like 70. I think Bard is like
60 something, 70%.
Yeah.
It's a big number.
So basically, if they can't fill that with DIA, then they
Yes.
open it up to
Correct.
And
That's
very
correct.
often they do because it doesn't, the DIA does not supersede the tier requirement and the essay requirement. You can be DIA, but if you don't qualify with grades and your essay score, it doesn't trump those.
Well, for those of you who are not in our Facebook group, you can join our Facebook group and ask these questions. You have Deborah's email, so that's easy. But if you wanted to hear from other parents and post things, so it's pretty active. So I think that wraps it up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Deborah, for really pulling it all together, and really for all the Place NYC parent leaders that really are plugged in on everything that's happening. We share a lot of information, and we're happy to also ask the DOE and advocate for many of the parents in New York City that have these questions and concerns. Thank you.
This is our favorite thing to do. We like.
I love doing this. I love helping parents. Thank you very much, and everyone have a good night.
Good night.